What's up, you guys? Matt Jablonski here with the Point of Change. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you guys are having a beautiful Monday, getting through it the best you can anyways. Hope you had a wonderful weekend. And now we're back into the week. Today, we have an awesome program for you. Today, we're going to be joined by Dr. Sherry Yafai, who is the founder of the Relief Institute in California. This woman has a very long list of abbreviations after her name, so I will allow her to go over all those things. We also have a mystery guest who will be revealed today, Shyam Rahman, who is a PhD student at Cornell University, whose recent work involves studies at the state level variation in cannabis policies and their impact on prescription drug utilization, opioid use, and deaths of despair. We are also going to be joined by the one, the only Tommy Chong, who is running late at the moment, and he's not here yet, but he will be here. I promise you. I was promised by his agent that he will be here. His prior engagement is running a little long right now, so as soon as he's done with that, he will be out of there. He will come join us, and we'll wait for the old stoner to catch up. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Mike, Angie, Deborah, Michael, Bobby again. Hey, y'all. Amy, what's up? Good to see you. Patrice, Chris, good to see you guys. Thanks for everybody being here. Make sure you throw some hearts up on this video. Drop a comment. Let me know what you're up to. Go ahead and share this video out in any groups you might be a part of. In some addiction groups, this video may not be welcomed. This is a panel discussion about the benefits of cannabis, especially for people in recovery from illicit drug addiction. I am going to start out right away by introducing our panelists. Like I said, Tommy will be with us shortly. But for now, first of all, we have Dr. Sherry Yafai of the Relief Institute. Hello, Dr. Sherry.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Maddie, so much for having me in today. This is an amazing venue, and I'm so proud to be a part of it.
I'm so happy to have you here. We've been talking for quite a while back and forth, and it's good to have you finally on here. All right, next up, we have our PhD student, Shyam Rahman. How's it going, Shyam?
Joe, well, thank you for having me today.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, man. It's awesome to have you on here. And guys, you've all been guessing, you've been wondering, who is this mystery guest? Our mystery guest is a recovery advocate. She is a content creator on Facebook and YouTube. She is a mother. She is a wife. She has recently added cannabis to her recovery regimen after 2 years of being clean and sober. Everyone help me welcome Christina Mungavin.
Hey, it's me.
What's up, Christina? How are you?
How are we doing tonight? I'm so excited to be here, Maddie. You have no idea.
I'm honored to
With
have you
everybody.
This is awesome. I'm super excited for this panel discussion. This is something, start off by saying that this is a controversial subject. Some people get a little heated about this matter. So please just, if you're in the comments, just, if you object to this, I hope that you will take an open mind to this and listen to what the doctors and what Christine and I have to say as an experience-based account. All too often in recovery, people who are using cannabis and say that it's helping them, they're told that they are delusional, or they're told that it's something else, that's impossible. You can't do that. A minor mood altering substance is no way to help yourself with a substance use disorder. You're just switching one drug for another. There's a lot of hearsay and a lot of nonsense that goes along with this. So today we're here to separate that fact from fiction. We're here to talk about experience-based. We're here to talk about medical-based. Once Tommy is here, we'll have a celebrity viewpoint on the cultural standpoint of cannabis and the changes that he's seen through his career. But let's start off with just a simple question of why cannabis. Doctor, would you please, you could start off, Dr. Sherry Yafai, about why cannabis? Why did you get into the cannabis medical field?
So I got into cannabis as medicine primarily for the treatment of cancer. So that's how I got into it. But once I got into it,
There he is, the man, the myth, the legend, Tommy Chong. How you doing, Tommy? Good to have you here.
Thank you. Go ahead, finish. What were you
Okay.
Go ahead, doctor.
So I was saying once I got into cannabis, it literally opened so many other doors and pathways, things that I didn't even realize. And I was one of those people who patients would come in and they'd say, I'm using pot to treat my X, Y, and Z. And I'd kind of roll my eyes and be like, yeah, whatever. You're really just getting stoned, right? That was my mentality for about 12 years in the ER. I mean, and I feel bad about it, but I also want to reach out to people who are there now, right? That's where their mentality is. And just to give you a different perspective. And once I started working with cannabis, it didn't stop with cancer. It started with high sobriety, and that was a rehab facility designed for individuals who were 30 days sober and who needed a sober living facility. And we allowed for cannabis use, and not just allowed for it, but I sat with patients and literally talked through what type of cannabis they were going to use and what type of protocols we were going to use. Because the goal was also not to re-encourage smoking in a home where there's other people, right? So we were using non-inhaled pathways of cannabis, which was incredibly useful to go back into kind of the quote unquote real world once they left. And what I found was that patients, individuals did so much better when they were able to sleep at night, when they weren't, anxious all day. They were able to engage in therapy. They were able to go out and kind of be a part of the world and let their social anxieties quiet and be more engaged and more ready for that next step in their lives of re-engaging back in what ultimately brought them into addiction, right?
Excellent.
So it's been an amazing path. And I agree with you, Maddie. A lot of people talk about, oh, this is just substituting one addiction for another. It's not. And in the world of medicine, we talk about, substituting one medication for another all the time. That's what all of the Suboxones out there are, all of the other medication-assisted treatments out there are in the world of opiate addiction, right? We do substitute benzodiazepines for a different type, for alcohol, for benzodiazepines. So we do this anyways in the world of medicine. Why not utilize cannabis as that type of medication, which is much less addictive, much less dependency-inducing, much more widely available. And at the end of the day, patients actually become healthier with it as opposed to having more debilitating diagnoses thereafter.
Excellent answer. I completely agree. I have often used medically assisted treatment as a segue into cannabis treatment because for some strange reason, the mindset is that pharmaceuticals are more widely accepted as a medication than a plant-based medication. So when I encounter people that are kind of, have a lot of stigma, I generally start off with saying, well, have you heard about Suboxone or methadone or these other drugs that we use to get people off of drugs? And generally, if they're accepting of that, I can generally move the conversation into accepting of cannabis. It's when I have, and even when they're against that, I can, bring up the fact that, well, here is a medicinal, a plant base versus a pharmaceutical, and usually can use that point to leverage people to get them to see it from my perspective. So we'll cut down to Tommy Chong here since he's our late joiner. How you doing today, Tommy?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here, brother. So
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you for your perspective on, you've been in the limelight of cannabis, in the limelight of the cannabis industry for a long time now. So
Generations.
Generations.
Yes.
Yeah. That was the word I was going for. So have you noticed a shift culturally? Have you noticed a shift towards cannabis?
Big time. Big shift. I think the mostly is elderly ladies. Back in the day, if you were affluent, your later years would be consuming alcohol.
Yes.
And there are a lot of jokes behind that, but it also ruined a lot of lives and a lot of health people. And so I found the immediate change was with the older ladies that needed help sleeping and needed help with their lives, period. And then not so much guys. Guys tended to stick to their hard drugs, their beer, their booze. But it was the ladies that changed it. In fact, I was at a dinner party, and this one elderly lady, she told her daughter, daughters, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. She goes, I've got this great product from this guy that's selling it. His name is Tommy Chong, and he sells I've been using his product. He sells the best. And the daughter goes, Tommy Chong? He goes, yes, I think that's the name. Yeah, he's on TV. He's selling this CBD, and it helps me sleep. And then he's got another one that helps me, stay awake. It's incredible. You got to look him up. And the daughter just, oh God. Now my mom's telling me about Tommy Chong.
Mom, I know who he is. I have him on my hoodie.
Every kid. Everybody knows, especially now later on in life, doctors, lawyers, so many people. They say, I grew up listening to you guys. My dad used to put it on in the car, keep all the kids quiet, put on our tape. And it's crazy, the journey that we've had.
Oh man, that's awesome. That is such an awesome story. Thank you for being here, man, and for sharing that with us. And my phone is ringing. Get out of here. Oh man. So Shayab, I want to jump over to you with your study that you recently did about prescription medications. After this study, what was your findings on everything?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were taking a look at how prescription drug utilization changes in a series of drug classes. And all these drug classes we chose because they were aligned with the medical indications for cannabis that were laid out by the National Academies for Science, as well as several other medical boards that guide the decisions that physicians make when they are able to prescribe cannabis for some therapeutic use. And so we find quite large and significant reductions in the use of prescription drugs, which we take as an indication of some self-medication that's going on, at least within the Medicaid population, as well as more broadly. And so we're excited about these findings. We feel like they are pointing us in the direction of better policy that allows us to understand how people are using cannabis, where they're using it, and how we can best make sure that they're doing it safely and have access to it when they need it. Yeah.
Amen. I appreciate all the work you're doing there, man. I've really noticed, and Sherry, you've touched on this as well about how the cannabis industry is today, that the people who are I shouldn't even use the word prescribing, the people who are giving the cannabis to the patients are not medical professionals. They in fact cannot by law ask you about what medications you're already taking. So I really think studies like the one that you're doing right there are really going to help forward move with stuff like that, to get into the research of what dosage and what scheduling should look like for different individuals with different things going on. And Dr. Yafai, I'll throw this back to you. Has there been forward movement? Do you have any kind of evidence on that? Like if a person comes in with X, Y, and Z, do you have a dosage and schedule things that are coming out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. I'm going to take one step back, though, and relate back what Cheyenne was saying and Tommy's saying, which both kind of say the same thing. That is that the Medicaid population tends to be either older or younger, right? Those are the people who use medications the most often. And if we stick with the older category, people who are using opiates for pain control, patients who are using benzodiazepines to sleep, hypnosedatives to go to bed, Ambien, Lunesta, etc. We're taking that, and to Tommy's point, the older ladies who tend to use more medications, right? So we're seeing that same category, both in Tommy's description and Cheyenne's description, coming down, right? And it really reflects harmoniously together. And it's the same thing I see in my offices. About a third to half of my patients are over 65, and we're doing it for sleep. We're using it for arthritis. We're using it for dementia control. We're using it for behavioral agitation with dementia, Parkinson's, etc. As we see these kind of things and these research articles play out. So to your point, Maddie, do we see better dosing strategies? Yes. We are seeing more often as individuals like Cheyenne do better and better research out there, we can give people better recommendations on dosing strategies. So for example, for the group here who's going to be listening in today, hopefully there's a wonderful doctor named Dr. Yasmin Hurd out of New York, who's been doing some amazing research specifically on CBD and rehab, like heroin withdrawal and recovery. Okay, she started off with mice models, and now she's doing it with human clinical trials. And what we've seen really beautifully is that high dose CBD only because of her restrictions with research, right? That's why it's limited to CBD only. High dose CBD has really been very helpful for individuals who have withdrawal. The word I'm looking for here, Christina, I think you were using it before when you. I'm totally losing my words here. Sorry, everybody.
That's
When you
okay.
have a desire to go back to using.
Oh, like getting triggered or like
Right.
Urges, yeah.
Triggers and urges drop down quite a bit using CBD. We also see improvements in anxiety. We see improvements in sleep. So we see generally people and mouse models both having less of all of that and having better long-term outcomes in terms of rehab. So dosages that they're quoting is between, I believe, 100 and 200 milligrams per dose, which is really hard to access, by the way, for like a lay person to get a hold of that much CBD per dose is a lot. So we have to kind of modify for artisanal dosing, and then we can also modify to add in THC for that dosing strategy.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that there's forward movement, and that's one of my biggest thoughts and one of my biggest objections, I guess I would say, if that's a word that I should use. But my objection to people using cannabis, it has been that there isn't much research on what you should do for dosing, what you should do for scheduling, and which strains are best for recovering from what drugs, things like that. I really think are things we're going to improve on in the future. And then we'll jump down to Christina down there. I would love to hear your why. I want to hear why cannabis. What made you think after 2 years of 100% clean and sober, things were going pretty well, but what exactly happened?
Right. So when I had gotten sober, for the first time, really, like I actually had the ability to get sober and then stay sober. But I realized that I was feeling like I was just getting these horrible, crushing like spouts of depression. And I would talk to my sponsor about it, in the program. And I am by no means against the program. I still apply many of those principles that I've learned in the rooms to my daily life. But to say that I'm in the fellowship now, I wouldn't say that I am. But anyway, so I was talking to, like my sponsor about why is it that I'm feeling so depressed all the time and I'm doing what you're telling me to do. And I'm consistently in my step work and I've been praying and I've been doing this. So why is it that I still feel this way? I still feel depressed to the point where, I didn't even want to get out of bed. And then after I had my last child, little Mila, my postpartum, like it was suffocating, like the depression and the anxiety and just constantly worrying. And it was getting very, very heavy to carry around. And I brought it to my husband's attention and I was afraid, honestly. I'm going to be honest with you. I was afraid to get put on any kind of medication just because of my track record and how I reacted to pills and stuff like that. To anybody that doesn't know, I'm, in sobriety for numerous years now from opioids. I was using heroin. I was using pills before that. So I was very afraid. And to some, they may say, well, that sounds like an excuse, but to me, it wasn't. I genuinely wanted to do what was best for me. And I started really researching medical marijuana, and I started reading up on people that, have used it in their lives to overcome these obstacles that they were facing in terms of mental health. And I was like, you know what, rather than have to go on some kind of anxiety or antidepressant or something along those lines, why don't I try this? And I brought it to my husband's attention. And at first he was like, let's pump the brakes a minute. Like, this is kind of scary. We don't know how this is going to react. We don't know how you're going to, we don't know what it's going to do. Like, are you going to start getting cravings after you start incorporating this into your life? Are you going to start getting triggered? Is this going to help you? So it was definitely something that we had discussed for quite some time. I had to do my research. And also I know from a lot of personal experiences from, personal relationships with people, I've seen them go down the same path that I went down. And I've watched them, they were able to have medical marijuana in their lives and use it in their daily means of living. And they were fine. And actually they were happier. So I decided to try it for myself. And when I say this, I mean it. I've been only depressed twice since I've decided to really plug this into my daily way of life. And it's insane. At least every month, for weeks straight, I was falling into these bouts of depression before I really started using medical marijuana. And as soon as I started it too, like my quality of life just really, really, it was just immense, you know, it really grew. So I was like, I'm on to something here. Like, I'm happy. I'm not depressed anymore. I'm content with who I am. I'm content with where I'm at in life. And I was definitely afraid to talk about it at first, especially being that I have my own platform and it was something that I've never disclosed with anybody before. We talked about this behind the scenes, that I really wanted to ensure that before I jumped into this, it was something that I wanted to make sure worked for me. I didn't want to, you know, just, I don't want people to think that I'm sitting on my couch all day, you know, like getting stoned. You know, I incorporate it into a very positive way and a very smart way. You know, I would say a very responsible way is the word I'm looking for. It helps at night to really ease my mind. My mind just spins all day long. So for me to be able to keep up with my thoughts sometimes, it really just slows my mind down in a sense where I can keep up with it and I'm not all over the place. Helps me for sleep. That, like I said, the depression is almost not even there anymore. So I could talk about this for days. I really could.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Thank you for sharing all of that with us. That's great.
Absolutely.
And I often bring up when people ask me, you know, why cannabis? Why is that? Why does that even come into your mind? It seems very counterintuitive. Why would you use a mind remote altering substance to help you with a substance use disorder? It's very counterintuitive. It goes against the grain. People ask me why. And the best way I can explain to them why a recovering addict would use cannabis is you think about some of the symptoms of someone going through withdrawal, detox, or recovery. Sleeplessness, inability to eat, moodiness, urges to do drugs. Those are common symptoms. Well, what are some of the things that cannabis relieves? It helps you sleep. It helps you eat. It helps regulate mood. It even helps you with your drug urges. I can't tell you how many times through my recovery I had urges, long-lasting urges in some cases, where one hit of cannabis and it's like, why was I feeling that way?
Yes.
Why was I
for
just
saying
thinking
that.
about doing meth? Like, that is the last thing I should
You
do.
laugh
I need
at
to do my
yourself.
dishes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. That's really, I think, the amazing part. And use the word mind altering substance in the words of one of the researchers that there's hundreds, if not thousands, of articles in the medical community on cannabis. And one of them wrote, which I think is very beautiful, they wrote, "This is the most mild of medications that we utilize. Opiates are a lot stronger than this." And in general, this concept that this has to be mind altering at all times is actually not quite accurate. I think you can utilize it so it alters your mind, but you can also utilize it so it's not, right? And dose really here matters. How often you use, how much you use, what you're using. I think you might even be able to give us some more insight into all of this. But really, that idea that this is going to be mind changing, it doesn't have to be. It can be just calming, just like a lot of our other pharmaceutical medications are designed to be, right?
Amen.
Absolutely.
Tommy, I'm going to throw a question down to you. I'd like to, you were a very godly man, as people might not know that about you. You're a very spiritual person. And the last time we talked, you talked a little bit about God and a little bit about cannabis. How would you say that cannabis and your spiritual life blend together?
You just proved it right then, because that's what I was thinking about when you were talking to the other people about. Because cannabis, the reason people do cannabis is because it puts them closer to God.
I agree with that. I definitely do.
And the ancients in India, they knew that. That's why the first real recorded use of cannabis was used religiously, spiritually. And they still do that all over the world. That's what Mexico, that's when they were smuggling it across the border. Not with smuggling back in the day. They were just carrying it with them across the border because that was their medicine. Mm-hmm. That was their church. That was their it's a life. Because what cannabis does, it puts you in the moment. Mm. And when you're in the moment, you can only be full of bliss. Because every moment, see, is a gift from God. And when you realize that you are a gift from God yourself, that whatever God has, and this is what Jesus was teaching, everything that I can do, you can do. The mind that's in Jesus, me, Jesus, is in you. And when you get close to God, it doesn't cure everything. It doesn't, fix everything. But what it does, it gives you the reason why these things are happening to you. And when you find out the reason why these things are happening to you is very simple. The reason, it's like darkness is the absence of light. That's all darkness is. And ignorance is the absence of truth. And whatever you're doing, it shows that you're human. You can't get an addiction in heaven because there's no need, want, or desire. But in the physical world, which we live in, there's everything. Everything. And so everything has an opposite. The opposite of everything is nothing. Amen. In the spiritual world, there's absolutely nothing but love. That's all. That's all there is. In the physical world, it's a school. We're all in school. We're all learning. We're learning what it's like to be a drug addict. We're learning what it's like to be broke and homeless. And we're learning all these things. And the reason we're learning is to improve our soul. Our soul needs these things. Our soul needs to be reminded of how beautiful life is, how beautiful God is.
Amen.
You see, and we are of God. And whatever we're doing is to learn. And so when people commit suicide, it's not a tragedy. Death is not a tragedy. Death is a transition. And we don't know where we're going because we're here in school now. We don't need to know what's going in the next class or the one that we just left. We're here now and we're learning. And we've been taught the answer. And the answer we've been taught since the beginning of time, which was never happened because there was never, but say the beginning of humans, for instance. We know this. All this knowledge is within us. So we're really in the soul, but we're here to learn. And whatever experiences that we're doing, we're also taught, okay, this is what you're doing. Now, you want to make your life better? You want to get out of this? Here's how you do it. There's only one way out. And that's to acknowledge God. Now, you don't have to. And that includes believing in God.
Amen.
Believing with all your heart and soul. And no, because that's who your heart and soul is God. And what is God but a very hugely intelligent, more intelligent than you are? Because we all, think about this. This will blow your mind. God created these universes. And everything God did, we can do. Not right away. It'll take us a while before we reach his level. Quite a while. But every time we come back, we're in school and we're learning. We're learning how to be rich. We're learning how to be poor. But we're all learning. And everything is not forever. In fact, the only thing that is forever is eternity.
Amen.
But our learning here, there's a short life. When people live to be 100, everybody goes, whoa, he lived to be 100, like it's a race or something, It's not a race. It just happens to be there. He or she managed to make it long. Now, we it's amazing what we are. We're made up of zillions of cells, but everything, all those zillions of cells start with one, just one, to make just human body that we have. And so each of us, we're a universe. And we have to take care of our universe because we are gods over our universe, which is our body, our mind, our soul, our spirit. Not our soul, but and not our spirit, because that's eternal. But we're here physically. We're all actors in a play. And I have a solution for a lot of things about movies. My solution is that, and we're already doing this, by the way. My solution is to document everything that goes on, and we're doing that now with the security cameras and body cameras and iPhones, and so we're not only living this life, but we're watching the replay of it. We can replay our own lives now, and we do it all the time. Selfies, all that. And so the intelligent level of the human race is rising so high right now that we have a Trump happening. We have the Supreme Court trying to take away or talking about taking away women's ability. I mean, when you're like, I consider myself, now I'm old enough, I consider myself somewhat of a stoner guru, to the point where I've reached that point where, like, you call me on the show to have me tell you exactly what I'm telling you. So I've reached that point, and I've reached the point of there is humor in everything. And if you can find the humor in everything, then you've achieved a godlike status that I have. Because no matter what happens, no matter what it is, there's humor there. You name it, there's humor there.
My mom tried to teach me that my whole life, so I can definitely appreciate that perspective. And I really appreciate what you said about how addiction is almost natural, how it's just something we go through a learning experience. And I think that really touches on exactly what we're talking about here with cannabis being an exit drug or being a way to help people out of that situation, out of that learning experience.
Go biblical.
To help them.
And the biblical is judge not. Judge not. That applies to your life. Don't judge it. Learn about it. And then the other thing is judge righteous judgment. And so when you've come across a truth, then you go, whoa, I found a truth. It's great. You know.
Amen. I agree, man. That was an awesome. Thank you for sharing all that wisdom with us, brother. I really appreciate it.
Well, that's why we're here. And I was at they got a 12-step program with cannabis in LA, and it just started up. It was a dispensary. A guy with a dispensary, and he was going to, I guess he was attending the 12-step program at the same time, and so he combined the two, and he had me talk there, and the best one is, it's not only a rehab, you know, for talking and that, but it's a gym and it's a sauna, and it's to make your body healthy, you know, to get your body healthy, because really that's your way out of everything, by the way, you know, is keeping a healthy body. And by the way, you can do exercises laying in bed. That's what I did when I was recovering, you know, because I wasn't sick. I was, you know, drugged out, and I was trying to get, you know, that feeling of that druggy feeling out of my system, you know, and I did it walking around and doing isometric exercises in bed, which I do while I'm sitting. Even when I'm sitting, you know, I can't just sit. I do like crunches with my butt, you know, butt crunches. And I do that with my shoulders and my arms and hands and that, just to keep it's a universe I got. And when I was asked before, you know, when I was like, everything was anti-drug, you know, I was on the right-wing talk shows and that. They're the weed is the devil and all that shit. I would tell them about Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger is the healthiest man on the planet at one time. He would not, if he took something of water and it had a little soda in it, he'd spit it out. But he would smoke pot. And that was the only thing that the healthiest, Mr. Olympia 6-time champion of the world smoked cannabis, because he knew that not only it wouldn't hurt, it would help. And and look where he is. He became the governor of California, man, and he couldn't speak English when I met him. You talk about
you can do anything.
You put your mind to. And he's a cannabis smoker.
Yeah, we are everywhere. That's for sure.
Yes, we are.
Yes, Dr. Cherry.
If I may, I think it's always important to be kind of responsible with these kind of discussions about, what's good, what's bad, what's, what does all this mean? Because I think when we all talk about cannabis, nowadays here in 2022, there's so many options out there. In California, I mean, it's like going to, like you're a kid in a candy store almost. There's just, the shelves are filled with different types, different edibles, different flowers, different, tinctures. There's hemp, there's cannabis, there's, what's sold in a dispensary, what's legal online. So it's really important, I think, when we talk about these things, to talk about what really specifically we're talking about. So I think for Maddie, for Christina, for Tommy, most of when we talk about the words cannabis, we're talking about flower-based options that you can inhale, which is great, which is lovely. But I do want to remind people that vape pens with oils, they are also fine and lovely, but they are really being manufactured now to a point where I do worry about addiction from that perspective. Because
with the
vape oil.
Vape pens?
Yeah, because now, right, exactly. The flower is really, most places between like 15 to 30% THC, but these vape oils are getting, you can't find them for the most part below 70%.
Yeah, they're very potent.
They're very potent, and they're like 80 to 90%. They're being flavored and driven towards teenagers and our youth. And so we really, when we have
the vape, I can't do vape. I can only do flower. I can only do joints.
That's exactly right. And I'll tell you, it's much healthier for you to go down the flower path than it is these vape pens. And I'm starting to see it in my office practice, where we get teens and early 20-year-olds where they're really like, they don't put it down. It's like a nicotine pen, right? Yeah. Where they're just on it all day long, and they're getting these really negative effects, right? So we have to be really mindful that cannabis is not, the sum total of cannabis really is not all equal, right? We've got CBD dominant products, we've got THC dominant products, we've got dosing changes, we've got different modes of delivery. So we really, I want to make sure whoever's listening to this is, flower, I really, truly don't think you can ever go wrong with flower, because it's fast. So you know how it's going to take effect on you very quickly. You know that you can stop very quickly, and it's out of your system pretty quick too, which is nice. But again, the vape oils, those really high THC dosages that you're seeing, and really consistent, frequent use. I mean, these kids are going through these pens like in a week, right? In 2-3 days sometimes. So we got to be really mindful of that.
Absolutely.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there isn't a lot of studies that have been done on the long-term effects of high dosage levels of THC in big increments over, the way people are using it now, large dosage over a long period of time, continuous dosage like that. There's not a lot of research that says, hey, what is that going to do to you in 10 years? What is that going to do to you in 20 years? We don't have the data yet. So be cautious with all of this stuff. And I always remind myself being a recovering meth addict, I remind myself that amphetamines were originally derived from the ephedra plant. So just because something is derived from a plant doesn't mean it's good, and that it's, so when I hear of extracts and of potency levels that high and things, it kind of piques my oh wait, you be careful with that, you know. So I always tell people be cautious with extracts, waxes, concentrates, things like that, because it's not natural anymore at that point. A natural cannabis plant, you take a natural cannabis plant, it usually puts out between 5 and 30% THC levels. When today's day and age, we like to think of cannabis as natural, but honestly, a lot of the ways that it's grown in things is no longer natural. It's not grown outdoors. It's not grown in normal soil. It's grown inside under special lighting with special water. So we've taken nature out of the aspects. So a lot of the cannabis you're getting today, yes, it's a plant, but is it 100% natural? That's questionable.
Right.
Perspective.
I also wanted to bring up too is like I definitely favor flower. That's my go-to method. I do have a pen. I rarely hit it unless like I'm in the house, you know, and the kids are, you know, downstairs running around. I don't want it to get anywhere. So like, you know, I'll do it safely, I'll do it responsibly, I'll hide real quick, you know, if it's before, you know, they come upstairs or whatever. But the oils I feel like are very easy to kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't always know where they're coming from. You know, when you go to somebody and they just so happen to be selling these oils, you know, like if you're someone who's going that way, you know, if you're a cannabis user and you're getting it off of the streets, always be mindful that these oils, you know, you're ingesting that, you're smoking it, you have no idea what's really in it if it's coming off the street, just like any other street drug. Just like anything else, you know, there's fentanyl in everything. I've been reading articles where they're finding fentanyl in marijuana now. So it's like we always have to be very mindful of like, you know, what we're using, how we're using it. So I'm glad that you brought that up, you know, to always ensure responsibly and its responsible use. And as far as, you know, I've questioned this, like, do I, like, with how just up and hip really, you know, that marijuana is, and we're starting to see all of these distributors and all of these dispensaries and stuff like that. Like, what happens with kids now? You know, like, I think it's extremely crucial that we keep it to an age limit. I was someone that smoked when I was younger, and now that I'm older and I have children and I use it as medicine, I'm like, I would love to see people be able to get what they need, but I don't want it to overstep, you know, that fine line between using it irresponsibly at a younger age, you know, and someone who actually needs it. So like, I don't know how I feel yet about it, like kind of taken, you know, like you could just walk into them anywhere, you know, like I'm like, it makes me nervous sometimes.
This is why these kind of discussions are so key, is to educate our youth, because, you know, I had a 13-year-old patient whose older brother was going to the dispensary and buying him 50 milligram THC pills so he could sleep at night. It was like 50 milligrams is like 10 times the average dose for an adult, let alone a 13-year-old. And, you know, they were like, we did our own research online and we decided a little is good, a lot is better. And I see that very often in the whole cannabis world. A little is good, a lot is better. It's not always true. In fact, I would say that that's rarely the truth. A little is good, a little is good. In medicine, we always say the lowest amount of medicine to get your result is the best amount of medicine, right? Because then we don't have to deal with side effects. Then we don't see a lot of misuse or abuse in things. Same thing here. We want to use the lowest possible dose in order to get the maximum effect. And I think Christina, Maddie, Tommy, Cheyenne, I think this is really where all of us here and our voices are really important to get this message across, is that dose matters, right, and what you're using matters. I know when I was a teenager, our parents and, you know, people used to say, be careful when you go out to a club or when you go out for drinks, right, with friends. We were all doing it, right? But when you go out to get a drink, you know the difference between beer, tequila, vodka. You knew what your drink of choice was. And you also wouldn't let a stranger pour that for you as a girl, right? And there were reasons behind that. And it's the same concept here. You got to know which one is your dose, right? How much your dose is. You don't need to overdo that, because that's the overdoing it part can really have negative potential consequences. That good dose for you is really important. And you're right, Christina, you know, it's we're walking a fine line here in terms of where we see teens using and education and how to kind of prevent us and this kind of plant from going down the path of nicotine and alcohol, right?
Right.
And learning those lessons, right? Learning those lessons from other drugs, medications, whatever it is, and applying it here before we get to that point in cannabis.
Right. And I think part of this also becomes getting the right information in parents' hands and changing stigma in that sense, because the way and the time and the experience you have your first time using any substance really impacts how you use it long term. And so if you have a bad first interaction, first encounter, it sets the tone for what your relationship with that substance is. So
Absolutely.
I think that, I mean, going back to Dr. Yafai's point, the dosing of cannabis is huge, but I think that we can also think about this in a use case with pens and with oils, and that there used to be, and there still are products. I'm thinking of Dosist as one in California, where it was a pen, but it had a vibration built in for whatever they determined was a dose. And I think that part of this initiation and having this first experience with cannabis, if you're self-medicating, needs to be in a guided, dosed environment where you know that does this to me. What happens if I don't do it? Now I know, right? It needs to be iterative, or else you get into these situations where you have teenagers who very frequently, especially when they're in high school, are also using nicotine vapes, and they think that this cannabis THC vape is going to hit them in the same time frame and at the same level as their nicotine vape, and that's very dangerous. One, but two, sets this very bad first encounter, and it also sets their tolerance level well before we can intervene, right?
Definitely. I agree 100%. Myself, I live in an illegal state, which is another reason why I do these kind of things, to try and raise awareness for, I would love to see the laws change in the state, especially because a lot of the laws contradict themselves. Marijuana is legal in Wisconsin in some form, CBD, Delta 8. And in fact, in the city of Madison, our state capital, marijuana is completely decriminalized within the capital limits. So we have this very strange duality of laws happening in my state. So that's another reason why I like to be here and present education and present a person who, I use cannabis, but I'm not the stereotypical stoner. And I feel like I have a good voice and a good platform here to spread a good message and let people know that it's not the demon drug that it has been listed as. And I love, Cheyenne, you just brought up the stigma, and I would love to touch on that just a little more. Has there been any stigma that you've faced, Cheyenne, since your studies seem to be orientated towards cannabis and the effects of legalization of cannabis and things like that? Have you had any people that either won't work with you or don't want to talk about that subject with you?
I think, I definitely have. And I think a lot of that comes from this disbelief that cannabis can be medicinal, therapeutic, and valuable. And I think that this is a long-standing, avenue of stigma that's going to take a lot of time and care to go back up and to fight against. But I think a big part of this becomes giving these model cases where we know that cannabis has therapeutic value, and showing a use case where we can do it effectively and have long-term results and positive outcomes, right? And so for me, what that means is, guiding regulation in a way where we can say what is safe and what is not, and what do we know cannabis is and what do we not know about cannabis, right?
Excellent. Yeah, that research is definitely something I'm looking forward to. Myself in recovery, I was very fortunate to have a supportive family, and everybody knew, like, I'd been a stoner for years. And then when I got onto meth, it was like the old stoner Maddie disappeared and I became this crazy meth head. And then now I'm back to being the old stoner Maddie, And I think everybody that knows me and loves me.
Tom, pooped and peed in the house again.
I'm in trouble.
How dare you?
Well, I wasn't doing podcasts. How could I take him out for a walk? I thought I left the door open for him, but I guess I never.
We needed that comic relief. That was perfect.
I need to get myself together over here.
Oh no, that was great. What were we talking about? Stigma associated with cannabis. Myself in the recovery community, I have faced that stigma. There's been plenty of people in the past who've messaged me and said, hey man, I either won't follow you anymore because you talk about cannabis, or I don't want to work with you because you talk about cannabis. And I've had people message me and say, hey man, that's a great idea, and I'm totally for it. But because of the programs I'm involved with and the things I do, I can't advocate for it, so I can't do those things with you. And that has been, for me, I've learned to take it very well. But in the beginning, it was something that made me feel like there were, like, why is nobody talking about this? We say progress, not perfection, and we say, you got to have all these options for recovery. And here we have this option of recovery that's actually working for a lot of people. And we're just being fluffed off and said, oh, you just go smoke your pot, you stoners. Oh, you're just trading one for drug for another. You're delusional if you think you can make that work. I give you a 0% chance of success. And there is just this very closed-minded attitude towards using a minor mood-altering substance of any kind in recovery, which of course is to be expected. But it's a stigma that we're all working very hard to change. Even if people don't, but I would like to say that cannabis is not a magic cure-all. It is not right for every single person. I'm not saying if you're 100% clean and sober, I want you to keep doing that. I'm not saying that you should start smoking pot. But for the people out there who have had multiple failed attempts at recovery at 100% clean, for people that are continuously going back to heroin, continuously going back to meth, continuously going back to pharmaceuticals, here's another option that, that this could work. And I don't think anybody is, I think so many people have been told that if you don't quit at all, then you haven't achieved anything, and if you're still smoking weed, then you really haven't changed. But if you look at me, I was a meth head for 13 years. I smoked, these teeth are fake. I smoked my teeth right out of my head. I was homeless. I was abusing every medication or every drug I could get my hands on. I was lying to my family, stealing, living a life of crime, in and out of jail throughout my 20s. And now here I sit, 5 years off of meth. I haven't, I've been doing a lot better in life. I can't say that I never went back to jail because I had a rough first year of recovery, but, doing a lot better. I'm a productive member of society. I'm a lead at my job. I also have my career I'm building. I'm getting married next year. Like, all of these things are evidence to the fact that cannabis can really, really help people not only step away from those hard drugs, but also maintain recovery and maintain mental health.
And by the way, Maddie, I think one of the things that people don't realize that in recovery, your brain has changed over those, how many years you were using meth, right?
13, yeah.
Just like your teeth changed, the other big organ also changed. And so to expect that just after a month, you stop, all of a sudden everything's just going to go back the way it was is stupid, right? I'm like, that's just illogical. And it really takes your brain 3 to 6 months at the minimum to even start rewiring back to where it used to be. So when you tell me it took you a year to get back to it was a rough year of rehab that first year out, it's kind of expected and normal. And I think we need to stop being like, oh, if you fell once, then you're going to fall again, and you're going to, then you're not sober. You're allowed to have these hiccups, and instead of kind of penalizing people about these situations, I think it's really important to acknowledge that your brain is just getting back to where it was 13 years ago, right? So it's a big transition point, and to expect that you're just gonna, flip a switch and it's gonna go back to normal is silly, right? And this is part of that discussion where mental health is really not discussed in our country and in most places, quite frankly. And that we really need to appreciate that this brain is an organ system, and it's not just going to change overnight. We don't want it to change overnight, because every time we'd go to a different environment, if I went to New York and it was freezing, I'd be like, I can't handle it. I'd come back to LA. But it takes time to change, and you get used to weather changes. I always say the brain is the best artificial intelligence out there because it's real intelligence, right? And we have to give it time for that real intelligence to adapt, to make change. And what we're seeing with cannabis is that it helps the brain make really positive connections and really positive changes. And those connections are healing and improving, not the other way around.
I also think that many people, and one of the reasons why it's so stigmatized is because so many people under the impression that, like I said earlier, like we're just sitting here getting stoned all day. And in reality, I don't have to touch it for days, you know, like I can, it's not something that it's almost, I don't want people to think that like just because I was, you know, we put one thing down, it doesn't instantly mean that we're picking that up and using it in the same exact way. I'm applying it to my life when I feel like it's necessary, like before bedtime. I rarely smoke actually during the day. You know, like when my kids are at school and I feel like I need to really just slow down a minute, you know, and to be able to process things the way that my mind can catch up, you know, then I'll take a hit, you know, I'll take a little puff and it's not like I'm sitting there constantly lighting up one after the other. It's a hit or two. And then I can carry on with whatever I got to do around the house. And really it's mainly at night, you know, so it's not like we're sitting here getting stoned all day, every day, and we're kind of substituting one thing for the other. It's really like we're using this because we feel like we need it in certain aspects of our lives. And it's helping tremendously. So why wouldn't we? Like, why wouldn't I do that for
You're
myself?
finding the balance back in life, and it's helping you with that balance.
Absolutely. It's very, it is. And I just really, like, I don't really have many problems today. You know, my mental health is really at a good place in life. And I really think it has a lot to do with medical marijuana and what it's done for me. And, yeah, I don't know. It's good. I like it.
I feel like one of the things that we haven't had a chance to talk on too much, which is really important, is like another place where stigma happens, which is for people who are interested in self-medicating and are scared or worried about going to their physician or provider and saying that they're using cannabis for these different things. And I think this ties in very nicely with what's been said already, because it's one of these mechanisms where if I don't feel like my cannabis use is going to be endorsed or encouraged or sustained if I engage with my doctor about it, then I'm very unlikely to even go and approach my doctor about it. And it can't be built into my treatment plan properly, right? And so one of the things that I'm really happy to see that's come up recently are policy measures that are going into place to encourage not only patients to go talk to their physicians about using cannabis, but also physicians to encourage their patients to think about substitution. Illinois has a program now where you can surrender any opioid script for medical marijuana.
Wow.
That initiates your medical card process just by surrendering an opioid script. And you can go to any doctor and do that. And so as these kinds of programs come into play, I think that we're going to be able to see some of the stigma broken down and see people able to self-medicate if they choose to, and give them this ability to, you know, we always say medicine, public health is at a population level, medicine is at the individual level, and we need to start putting medicine back in these people's hands, right?
Excellent. And I think that stigma also in the future, because there is a lot of evidence that suggests that cannabis use can, depending on the medication you're using, it can have adverse effects and it can have beneficial effects to the medicine that you're using. It can amplify the medicine's effect on the body. And I think with the stigma that we have now, some people go to their doctor and get prescribed medication and they feel this, they lie about the fact that they use cannabis. You know, they use cannabis on the regular, but their doctor says, do you use any illegal drugs or anything? Nope, I sure don't. So then now your doctor is supplying you with a medication that very may well have adverse effects with the medications that you're already, with the medicine that you're already using, cannabis. But, you know, we're keeping our mouths shut about the cannabis use. So I think as the future progresses and people are more open-minded towards cannabis use and people are more open about it, we're going to see a lot of improvements in that field. And I really just encourage anybody out there that's watching this that is using cannabis in their recovery and you've kept it quiet for reasons of stigma, shame, guilt, things like that. I'll quote Tommy Chong on this one. If you're not doing anything wrong, then you got to tell the truth. So talk about it and tell people, because if something's helping you, we need more people to talk about it, because otherwise it's going to keep being labeled as something that's not useful and something that has no medical value, as the federal government says now. So we need to make sure that people are out and talking about it and saying, hey, Either it's a big part of my life or it's a small part of my life, but it's helping. Whatever your experience is, there's no shame in admitting it and just talking about it, you know? It's only within the last 100 years that we've seen prohibition. Before that, it was known as a medicine forever, you know? Within the last 100 years, the mindset has changed so much, but in the last 10 to 20 years, we've had the reverse going on. You know, people are coming back around. And I really think that's awesome to see. Well, guys, we are just about out of time. I want to thank everybody for being an attentive audience, and thank you guys for all coming on here and doing this discussion with me.
This was great. Thanks so much for having me, Maddie.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is amazing, an amazing community.
Yeah, really happy to participate. This is great.
Definitely. Glad to have all you guys on. All right, guys. Well, if you guys would mind, stick around for just a second, and I'm going to let these guys go, and then I will come back on and we'll do an after review here. So, all right, thank you guys. Let's say goodbye to our guests for the day. Later, guys.
See you later.
All right, guys, there you have it. The Point of Change with a cannabis recovery panel discussion with Dr. Sherry Afai, Christina Mungavin, Cheyenne Rahman, and Tommy Chong. What an amazing group of people to have collectively in one video. And I'm just honored to be the person I am today and to be talking about this stuff. And my message to you guys is, if you have something that you're passionate about, if you have an idea or a thing that you really think is making your life better, or you have an idea, a concept for something you want to create, don't listen to anybody who tells you not to do it. I've had so many people tell me that this is stupid. I can't talk about this. This is a subject that's going to get me canceled. Maybe that, or even had people say, hey, that's a really great idea, but people aren't ready for that, Matt. You're going to hurt people by saying that. And I really just can't stress enough, if you believe in something, just keep pushing for it and just keep going. I mean, I've done amazing things and made amazing footwork forward in what I do here at the Point of Change in cannabis friendly recovery. So thank you all for being supporters. I love you all so much. Make sure you share this video out, react to it if you hadn't, drop a comment in there and let me know how you felt about this video. And I will see you guys tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Central for Toothless Tuesday. Until then, stay happy, stay healthy, and stay clean.